Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Alan, we'll start with you. Another good win for Ireland. A great autumn in general, I suppose, with 3 wins. What did you make of Saturday? Tight enough game?
It was, yeah. Obviously, getting the win in the end, Stuart, was obviously really important. I think it was a game that Ireland could have easily have lost. I think their defence was very, very strong and connected in that first half when Australia had a lot of possession. They were putting Ireland under a lot of pressure in their own 22 10-yard line. From the 10-yard line in, they were in that attack zone a lot, and Ireland defended very well. I suppose the disallowed try from Nick White when he makes that little break, and that was unfortunate. Australia had a lot of bad luck. They had a number of their top players got injured, went off, and they were quite disjointed. I think their discipline was really poor. That was something that was spoken about in the build-up to this game, issues that they've had around their discipline. When you have 4 neck rolls in your 12 penalties, it's a lot. Ireland had 12 penalties as well. So they can look at their discipline as well, particularly around, their decision-making and some offsides and some not rolling away quick enough at the breakdown. But was the word dogfight was used a lot after the game, I think, and that's what it was, both sides. And Australia came to kind of really disrupt Ireland, go at their breakdown, put them under a lot of pressure. And they had moments in the game, Ireland, where, they looked like they were going to find their mojo, but they didn't for any sort of consistent long period. And it was a real kind of arm wrestle of a game.
Matt, Australia just came up a wee bit short. You had always said they tried their heart out, which is pretty obvious to say, but they actually looked pretty good, but just maybe in the final third sort of let them down.
I think what Alan said is exactly right, mate. And this has been Australia's problem for a couple of seasons now. Their discipline is awful. They were the most penalised team in the championship. They gave away more cards than anyone in the rugby championship. And they're leading the penalty count. Like, that's not something you want to lead on the November series. They've given away more penalties than any team in the November series. And it cost them. It cost them dearly. Like the last penalty when Australia are mauling for a try was definitely a penalty. There's no two ways about that. The player joined the maul in front of the ball. The problem I have, not with that penalty, because it was definitely a penalty. I saw that at least 3 or 4 times in the game at other mauls. And when referees bring that out in the last play of the game, that's what really frustrates people. I thought the referee was very consistent on neck rolls, and the Australians were ridiculously guilty of neck rolls. Like as Quinny said, it's just beyond words how international players can do that. Because we could see on the video, they were all valid penalties. And to be fair to the referee, penalised Ireland for one, I think, during the game. But the Australians were awful in that respect. The thing that Ireland should be concerned about was the Australian have picked a good game plan. And this is the game plan that's been coming along for a while. People are holding possession for long periods of time and really attacking Ireland's breakdown, denying them the ball. Now, there's a lot of excuses on the Irish side. Sexton pulls out just beforehand, Crowley's first run, and lots of pluses in that. Stuart McCluskey, Crowley, O'Brien, all big pluses for Ireland in the long run. But that game plan that we've seen now against South Africa, and the South Africans are the best in the world, the Australians are attempting to emulate it, and not the most physical team in the world, or not renowned for it, but you could see they've lifted their physicality, their scrum and line-out was particularly good. I think we're going to see more and more of that style of play that Australia put in, implemented against Ireland in the future, because that, again, that seems to be the word going around the international traps. This is the way to stymie Ireland's attack.
Yeah, that's interesting. Matt briefly touched on it there, but it's really a story of 3 out halves for Ireland. Johnny Sexton going down, Jack Carley coming in with 30 minutes to kick off the start, and then Ross Byrne sort of coming out after a couple of years away from the international scene, kicking that winning penalty. So what do you make of it all? Sort of for Jack and Ross, pretty special days.
Yeah, obviously Jack Crowley's been a big winner in this this season. I think with the Emerging Ireland tour, getting called into the Irish squad, it'll do his confidence the world of good. I think it was being sprung like that on Saturday is a tricky one. It's hard, it's difficult, and you are coming up against a side who are going to really try and make it difficult for a player like that, particularly in a 10 position. You saw Valentini, I think there was one free kick early on. Nick White taps, gives it to Valentini, and he's just, all that's in his mind is running at Jack Crowley.
I can't believe Quinny, a back row would run at a 10 on purpose. I'm absolutely.
Yeah, and that
never crossed your mind, did it? Never
it
crossed your mind.
And that was the opportunity. So they spoke about that when they knew Sexton wasn't there. Get at Crowley, make him tackle. It's very obvious that any team would try and do that. So it was a strange kind of game, and it wasn't one of those ones that the breakdown was a mess, and some of the ball that Jack Crowley got was a little bit slow. Australia had plenty of numbers out, and I thought they defended very well. Also, the Australians, they numbered up, they identified which of breakdowns to attack and which to not. So there was lots of numbers Australian players on their feet. So not many opportunities for Jack Crowley. I think he did well without setting the world alight. I think would he got that kick if he was still on the field? Who knows? But Ross Byrne, to come on like that and have a moment, and as sports people, the whole narrative can change around people, and now people are talking about Ross Byrne and what he can do as well. So it was a wonderful kick for him, a great moment, and they're the ups and downs of sport. But I think having Jack Crowley in the conversations now was a good situation for Mike Catt. Trying to get a backline running and trying to get back up to Johnny Sexton. Joey Carberry obviously getting that knock against Fiji from that tackle and ruling him out was unfortunate, but it's opened the door a little bit, and that experience for Jack Crowley was really positive. So if Johnny Sexton was out in the field on Saturday night, would Ireland have been a lot better? Who knows? I think his presence is obviously massive, his experience and his quality. But I still think that he would have been under a lot of pressure the way Australia kind of defended and had it in their mindset, rip into Ireland, frustrate them, push it right to the limit at times. And that's what they did. So it was a good experience for Jack Crowley. I'm glad Ireland won the game. He's got 2 caps throughout this series. Andy Farrell's capped 5 players, I think, in the series as well. So even though the Fiji and Australian performances weren't what everyone would have wanted, it's a nice little reality check and a little bit of a stop, pause, reset moment for this team to actually, what Matt is saying there and what we all know, that if you kind of hit that situation where you don't get that smooth flow from your breakdown, because I think our set piece was good, our lineup was excellent, our scrum was good, but particularly off phase play, if that ball isn't as quick and you're facing lots of numbers in the back line, well, it's hard. No matter what kind of attack you have or shape or ball you put out the back, it's still difficult to get the ball out to the edge and find space. So not the easiest night for Jack Crowley, but I thought he did really well. And I think, Ross Byrne coming on, what a moment for him. It was really special.
Matt, a guy who disrupted the ball there, showed his class, Michael Hooper. How do you stop him coming to World Cup of caliber like him? He was brilliant out there.
I agree with Alan's choice of man of the match in Caelan Doris, but Michael Hooper must have been banging on the door as well. I thought about him, Matt. I thought about him when I was singing. And obviously, usually when you go player of the match, it's usually 75th, 76th minute that you kind of get it done. The game is in the balance, and I'm thinking if Australia win this game, it's Hooper. And so we're given till the kind of game. No, Alan, I wasn't criticising.
I know what you mean, but I think it was just one of those games, Matt, where I was thinking if Valentini's still on the field, he's in the conversation.
Great game.
But Michael Hooper, even though he didn't get a lot of carries, he's still so effective. And when you come up with those big moments, you're in the conversation. But he's how do you stop him? Well, I don't know, Matt. You as a coach, it's difficult, isn't it?
The great players you can't stop, Alan. You can only minimise their impact. And I think Michael, he withdrew during the championship in Argentina, and he didn't play in the championship, and that's only his third game back. And he wasn't as effective in the first two games, quite understandably. He hasn't played a lot of rugby in a long time. But I thought he was absolutely superb the other night. And you're up against World Rugby Player of the Year in Josh van der Flier. And I thought he was shaded Josh the other night in a losing team. He was everywhere. His tackling, his efficiency at the breakdown. Even though he wasn't stealing the ball, he was slowing the ball. He was turning up at the most absolutely intense moments of the battle and contributing. And we were sitting in studio, and we were running a Michael Hooper segment. We didn't get a chance to show it after the game, but we just kept saying, "Oh, there he is again. There he is again. Do you see Hooper do that?" And it wasn't anything major. He wasn't making breaks or scoring tries. It was just 20, 30, 40 little involvements that were magnificent, that were just technically beautiful and really contributing to his side's effort in the contest. And that's what Australia were doing. They're against a better team. And when you're against a better team, especially in the adversity Australia were losing, they lost 6 players, you've got to disrupt your opposition. And I think for any young, genuine open sides, and Alan, we had 2 genuine open sides on the field, which doesn't happen all the time in today's game. Australia have a wonderful tradition of playing a genuine open side, which tend to be a smaller, faster, efficient player, a groundhog, as we call them, a genuine number 8 in Valentini, and a 6, a stopper, we call them, a runner and a tackler. You get that. And Ireland were playing the same way. I like to think it's because of Australian coaching influence on the Irish game. They played a very similar back row. But Hooper was absolutely superb. And any young, genuine open side should watch that game as a masterclass on how to be an open side flanker.
Yeah, definitely, Matt. If we look at the autumn in general, who do you think are the biggest winners for Ireland?
Stuart, I think there's a strong list of that. I think, one, you're seeing a very a lot of continuity in the selection for the forward pack. They that is the same forward pack that has beaten South Africa, beat New Zealand 3 times, I believe, out of the last 4, and also have now beaten Australia. So you're seeing a lot of consistency with that. You're seeing Dan Sheehan blossom. You're seeing Caelan Doris blossom. You're also saying Stuart McCluskey, I think, is a huge winner. I thought Stuart had a wonderful series and proved he is not out of his depth at the international level, that more than that, he can thrive at the international level. Jimmy O'Brien on the wing, I thought, was also superb, proving that he's going to be a great utility back for Ireland. Mac Hansen added to his values as a player. I think also that if we consider the Fiji game, it was great to see some of these young players getting opportunities. We've got Ross Byrne came back on. I know people are putting Ross down, and I disagree with that. I think Ross has been given a bit of a hard mark.
You've always liked him, Matt. You've always liked him.
Look, the hard part with Ross, as I do like him, because if we were just picking purely on club form, so what are you doing with Munster, Leinster, Ulster, and Connacht? Ross gets the nod every time, because with Leinster he's superb behind Sexton. Ross's problem is he hasn't fulfilled that potential or that form when he's been given the opportunity at national level, but he's been discarded very quickly. When you compare with Joey, is up towards 40 caps. Ross was thrown out very, very early, and they've gone to that next generation of Crowley and Frawley and so on. And I'm not so sure that is completely the right strategy. We're getting so close to a World Cup now that that's getting very difficult. But I think that Ross Byrne is putting his name up there might be, in the long run, a very good thing for Irish rugby. He may very well still have a part to play in the next few years of Irish rugby where some people have written him off. And I understand that because he's international. On the international stage, he has not replicated what he does almost weekly for Leinster. Like, he is metronomic for Leinster in his kicking and in his generalship of the team when Sexton is away. It's almost seamless, not quite, but almost seamless. But that is not the case at the international level. And I just think it's great for Ross as a person to get some self-belief back, because he must have been very disappointed with how that's transpired for him on the international stage. Because I do think for the national team, he may yet have a significant role to play in the next 12 months.
Yeah, we'll see how that pans out coming into the World Cup. If we bring it just quickly back to Australia, a number of injuries. Biggest talking point was Nick White. He's now been stood down from all rugby activity for the next 12 days. The whole situation seemed to be a bit of a mess. You were there. What's your take on the whole thing?
Well, just my feeling when I saw the incident, and it was mainly the replay of Nick White's head hitting Josh van der Fleer's knee, because I kind of focused on him after he tried to make the tackle on Mack Hansen, and we thought it was an Ireland try. It was a foot in touch, and that one to me looked just like he kind of banged himself off the ground a little bit, and that's a kind of a dazed one that you're not really overly concerned about. But for me, the feeling I immediately got, the reaction I got off the Josh van der Fleer one was, I'd seen him kind of crunch down, and he wobbling backwards a little bit, and then when he stood, he wobbled a bit, and on his face, and I watched it back a few times, he doesn't look like he just looks dazed. And I think at that stage, and I've been strong on this for years, and I played the game, and I would have been the classic example of someone who wouldn't come off. I wouldn't want to come off. And, up to a number of years ago, we had coaches thinking, try and dust him down a little bit and get him back on. And that was understandable. But I think what's happened with the stuff around Alex Popham and Steve Thompson and players like that who've had unfortunate issues from concussions in the game, and real concern there. I think I've kind of gone to the point that even if you think there's any slight chance, I think obviously they have to go off and be assessed. But when they show some symptoms like that, I just think it's time to leave them off. And he's a very good player, Nick White. He's a really important player to Australia. But I think obviously what's transpired is the match day doctor who basically said he was watching the first clip of that attempted tackle on Mack Hansen, and that when the game restarted, he wasn't watching the second one. But I think the Australian doctor there, and when I look back at it again, when Nick White is kind of hunched down, he kind of wobbles backwards. Ben O'Keefe said, well, he's wobbling, we need to get him off. You could then see the actions of the medic and the doctor speaking into the mic. The pictures then went to Dave Rennie, who's talking back to him. You presume, we're not 100% sure. At that point, I think, it's all reactive. It's like doing commentary. It's very difficult sometimes to kind of absorb everything that's going on. But that's my feeling from the start, and it hasn't changed now. And obviously, I think the situation around the match doctor watching a replay or watching back the video clips, I think at that point, he's got to make a decision to watch the player. The play is started. He needs to watch the actions of the player and see if Nick White, got the lineout's perfect. He's fine up to that point. So the first one I've no issue with as regards, he shouldn't be removed then, because you watch the player and he looked fine. He looked like he had that zip, caught the ball perfectly, made the run, then get the second bang. And that's the one where I think he should stay off. He should, and that's my opinion. He should stay off there and not come back on.
But we obviously heard what you said on Saturday night. Player welfare is so important now. Have you had a chance to reflect on things, and has your opinion changed?
Look, mate, the player was taken from the field. So if we look at what the system, and look, I'm totally in agreement with Quinny. I'm not trying to stop. I'm not trying to put players on the field when they shouldn't be. Anyone with a head injury has to leave and should be kept off. And that is so. If we look at that, the system worked. He was removed from the field. My point is, as a coach, I trust the doctors. So if my doctor, every team I coached, I did what the doctor said. The doctor said the guy's got to go off or a guy can't play. I didn't question it. I didn't say, mate, we've got to strap him up, get him on. We can't. I never once did that, because you've got to look after your boys. You've got to look after your players. My point was, why did he go back on? And I just felt I'm not in a situation to judge the doctor. If he did his... So Parecki gets injured, the Australian hooker, and fails his HIA test and rightfully stays off the field. That is correct. That's what the system does. So the match day doctor had done his job there. If White comes off and then passes his HIA, what does the doctor do? So Quinny's saying, and there's a lot of argument, and I get that. He showed obvious signs, maybe he should stay off. And did the doctor miss that? The point I'm getting at is we've got some science there about HIAs. It's really hard for us as commentators of the game to go against science. And I'm very reluctant to do that. I do not want any player on the field that's had an injury. Every player should be kept out of the game. And I was very, very surprised Nick White went back on. My point was, I was asked to comment on it. I said, well, he's passed his HIA. We've got to trust the science. And I still believe that's what we have to do. We can't, because if we're saying Parecki fails the HIA and stays off, that's correct. White passes. What is the doctor's? What's the alternative for the doctor to? And that's the situation we're in. Obviously, I think that it pans out that the wrong decision was be made. But what other process is there except the science that we currently have? And I think it puts all of us in a difficult situation.
Say, Matt, and I know what you're saying, and I agree that there's no. I don't think any coach would tell a doctor who's saying this player should not go out in the field, keep that quiet, send him back out, or he's going back. No coach would, and I think that's where your argument a little bit got lost in translation, if you allow me to say that respectfully, because I knew where you're coming from. Absolutely, we trust the doctors. We trust the doctors both ways. And I saw Dr. Aina Falvey going onto the field in, was it 2018 or 17 or 18? It could have been 16 when Ireland played Australia in Dublin. Ireland were defending a 5-yard scrum. Conor Murray received a knock before that in a ruck or previous to. He's getting ready to defend that scrum. At this point, Conor Murray's like, he's that extra back row. He's so strong. He's so good at tactic. And I saw Aina Falvey, who identified it himself, looking to get in touch with the fourth official and the touch judge to get the referee's attention, to get Conor Murray off the field. So we've seen loads of examples, and I think that's important to acknowledge. There's no coach wants to endanger their lives. I think in that adrenaline rush, in that moment, you'd love to say, God, you'd love to be getting the news from the doctor that he's cleared, he can go back on, and you want to get him out there. But I think the problem here is when you have, and this is where, and it's something that kind of bothered me, is that if I was that player and my team doctor comes on and he's addressing the situation with me, he's checking on me, and he sees me, because you can see the team doctor when Nick White kind of stumbled backwards when he was in the crouch position, and then when he got up, he's trying to hold his hand and he's talking into the mic. So he's obviously saying, we got to get him off, he's in bother. He's seen that actually right up close. He's the one then who really should, in my opinion, take it out of the independent match doctor's hands. And he should say, we're not going to do a HIA here, Nick. I know you want to go back out in the field, but look, let's err on the side of caution here. Jake Gordon is ready to go. Let him out there. Let him do it. That's what I think. I think the Australian doctors here could have been better in what they were doing.
So, Alan, you're saying as soon as you see that stumble, that tiny little stumble, right?
It's caution. He needs to come
from the pitch.
And see, these guys are getting monitored and they're up close, and we're having debates about this, and there's cameras everywhere and there is doctors. But, you know, we have to try and go and reassure parents that go out and send their kids out playing games right across the world, that the coaches of these teams, amateur, underage teams, will see if they see any slight little bit of a stumble, and look, we can all get up and be dazed, and you may not be deeply concussed, but you might be just a bit winded or whatever. If you get a bit of a shock to the system and your head flips back, you can be concussed. But there's some of them there you can dust yourself down, you're grand and you're fine. But look, the reality is, because of the dangers in the game and the messages we're trying to get across, is we want people to remove those kids where there isn't those camera angles and there isn't that aftercare immediately there for people. So, look, it's one that just everybody can be a bit better on, I think. And look, if I've said this, and it's the same with any team, sometimes if it's your best player in the field and he's in that situation, we want coaches actually making these decisions as well, and being on their mic saying, look, get him out of there. We've got someone, bring on Jake Gordon. And so we still have a bit to go on it. But I think, having spotters there and the independent match doctors and what World Rugby have do. And to be fair, Matt, you got a lot of flack at the weekend, but you have been someone who's been, pro the zero tolerance around head-high shots and people flying into rucks and shoulder charging. So it's not as if you're saying the game has gone soft. But I think it was lost in translation a bit. We do need to back the doctors, but we need the doctors in this situation to get some help from the coaching team and say, look, let's get the player out of there.
See, I'll disagree with you. I don't think the coach should have anything to do with it, because coaches get a motive and they want to win. And I think in junior rugby in Australia, I don't know in Ireland, the referee, if in a junior game, a referee thinks a kid has got a bang, the referee is off and that kid's not allowed back on. And so the coach can't say, oh, he's okay, bad luck, mate. So the kid, all the way along, the athlete is given the best support we can. It's not the coach. It's not about winning. It's not about more points than the opposition. It's about safety for the kids. And I think in the international game, this is why we've got independent doctors. So the coaches can't say, oh, look, he's okay. And to be fair to the Australian doctor,
no, I think you're picking me up wrong there. I think if it comes to that situation where the independent match doctor misses it, I think I would be encouraging coaches to say, not get him back on, to say, look, get him off. He's staying off.
No, I get you, Al.
If you're a coach, Matt, and you have, 50-50 decision on selection, like your two halfbacks, you're going to play this nine or that nine. One of them starts, he gets the head knock, and you know that you've got a guy chomping at the bit to get on. That would help you. Obviously Nick White is a very important player and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, we've had cases of coaches in the last couple of years, not that recent, but in the English Premiership, at one stage I remember Steve Diamond talking about, a couple of these players. AJ McGinty was one of them for sale, and he was talking about, they were ruled out with HIAs and not let back in the field, and he was frustrated and he cost his team. So I'm just saying, in general, I think we need more coaches as well to kind of speak out about this and be of that opinion. Look, sometimes it's difficult. People's jobs are on the line. Winning that test match is fine margins. But I'm just saying, Dave Rennie and his coaching team are watching. They've got that on monitors there as well. And I think if they jumped in, so there's a number of people who could have solved this problem for me. Ben O'Keefe should have said, I've seen him wobble and he's off, and I don't want him coming back on. Okay, that may be strong, and I'm open to the argument of that. The Australian doctor who comes on, he is the one that's right beside him. He sees that stumble. He needs to send that up to his coaching team saying, look, he's gone, that's it. And then the last piece of it is the coach is buying into that. And not like, if it was the first one, Matt, where he was down dazed and he went for a HIA there, there's every chance he's coming back out onto the field with a spring in his step, and he's probably 2 or 3 minutes in the dressing room. So look, it's ultimately the player welfare and the message this sends out is really important. And it's kind of been proven that when the match doctor sees the footage after the game or wherever, he's now standing him down for 12 days. So that system needs to be better then, that independent match doctor makes sure he sees every piece, and whether he needs an assistant with him watching the game or whatever, that would have solved this problem straight away.
Yeah, Matt, we said it needs to get better, but I want you to have a last say on it, Matt, just so you can speak there. What do you think needs to get better?
Well, it's hard to believe that a player's off the field for 15 minutes. So it's not 2 minutes, it's not 1 minute, 15 minutes, and the match doctor hasn't watched the whole thing. Because what happens is the Australian doctor walks off and immediately the player, in this case Nick White, is taken from him and goes into the care of the independent medical staff, right? So that is a major flaw from that group of medicos to have not seen that. Now, then they take him in and they give him his HIA and he passes, which is staggering because, you know, this whole thing is designed so that doesn't occur. So I guess my point is we can't lose faith in the medicos. We can't lose faith in trusting science. And all through this, because I've had a lot of concussions and I've coached and I've seen this, we were not looked after. We would get concussions. We were not taken off the field. We were then given a beer after the game and we're back in contact training on the Tuesday. I mean, what was done to us is outrageous. I don't want to see that done to anyone. I don't want to see that done to anyone. But therefore, it has to be not coaches that are in this process. It has to be purely scientists. Now, in this case, it obviously turns out the system has failed because they haven't watched the video. So that just means the system has to get better to support that doctor. And that they need to other people. They might, as you say, Quinny, they might need other people there because he's missed something. So here's the doctor trying to do the right thing. He's seen that first one. His head hits Mac Hanson's hip. He goes to ground, rolls over. He shakes his head, gets up. He's okay. I agree with you. It's the next one. He sees it. Now, the referee is looking at that. Someone needs to tell him, mate, you need to look at the second one as well. Now, that's not hard. That's not hard to do. So we can't lose faith in the system, but the system has to keep getting better. And I would say to you that across the November internationals, my experience of it, the system has worked. That one, it obviously hasn't worked. But we can't lose faith in science, and we've got to stick to the science the whole way through.
Okay, thanks for that, lads. Obviously, as you said, we'll see how the improvement's vast, but let's hope it's such a big topic that it needs to get better. Alan, if we bring it back to the rugby and Andy Farrell, how will he be feeling now heading into the Six Nations in 10 months or so outside of a World Cup?
I think he'll be feeling pretty good. It's been, a really positive year for Ireland again. Winning a Triple Crown, going close against France and Paris. What happened in New Zealand, and now to cap it off with 3 wins in November. I think the highs are obviously, this Triple Crown, winning Twickenham. It's always a huge game against England. The 2 test matches that they won, the second and third in New Zealand, and the South Africa game. So there's some incredible highs there throughout the year. But I think maybe Fiji and Australia have kind of just given Ireland a little frightener. And I think that's no bad thing. So maybe that's a little bit of a wake-up call and a reality check. And look, there's no doubt that, Ireland aren't a million miles away. They're not this indestructible team that are unbeatable and unbreakable. I think they know that themselves. And I think that's good to recognise that. Because I think for any successful team, if you're going to get complacent, and I think they're incredibly hardworking. I think the coaches have done a really good job. They're a difficult side to put away, Ireland, and even when they're not on song, they're still, and I look back to that first test in New Zealand, and I think, it's probably been proven right. It hasn't been a fluke. They're under a lot of pressure in that game. They concede a couple of tries there, 3 or 4 tries in that game were preventable, and they were a bounce of the ball, and they were, very small margins. And I remember thinking after that first test, this is kind of glass half full more than half empty. And they've proven that to be the case because they're able to kind of take and absorb the mistakes, and they seem to be quite rugby intelligent to be able to fix them. They've good, intelligent people in the coaching staff, and I think they have a lot of good readers of the game in their team and their squad. So I think none of them would be under any illusions that, you know, Ireland need a little bit of luck to have a good 2023. They need to have key players fit and available. But, you know, you have to enjoy the moments as well. So I think he'll be really pleased. And like I say, it's no bad thing that there's a few kind of warning signs kind of in the last couple of weeks that if they switch off, if they're a little bit off the tempo and the pace. And this might sound crazy, but Ireland kicked the ball 26 times in the game the other day. Australia kicked it 28 times. And I think around the 20 to 20, early 20s is a good number. You've got to kick the ball in rugby. But I just think maybe Ireland on a couple of occasions probably could have, you know, been a bit more pragmatic, gone back a little bit to being direct, maybe trying to, you know, the arm wrestle that Australia were bringing, maybe Ireland could have countered that with a bit of direct approach themselves. I think there was a lot of lateral passing and they were trying to stick to what worked a little bit, getting them edges. And I just thought a little bit of old school rugby on Saturday night, you know, playing a little bit of territory and trying to be a bit more direct themselves. Mightn't have done them any harm. It might have changed it up. Even a bit of picking and going around the middle of the field and trying to compress Australia a little bit. So maybe that's an area that they need to have in the locker as well, to go back to that kind of old school, managing the tempo and scoreline without, you know, keeping the ball alive. But I think he'd be really pleased. I think the other area was probably the turnovers, which was, you know, there was 13 turnovers conceded. Australia conceded 5. So again, that's a little bit high. And these are the negatives and probably 27 missed tackles. So if you're winning a test match and you're missing 27 tackles, you're kind of thinking then, well, the opposition haven't taken their chances. And in fairness to Ireland, they're a really good scrambling defensive side. So if somebody misses a tackle in the front line, a lot of people work incredibly hard. So yeah, it's definitely glass half full, and it's definitely what a year. You know, 4 players in World Team of the Year. So there's loads of positives there. But I don't think it's any harm that we've seen a little bit of a small little lull in the last 2 weeks.
Matt, good to see a former Munster man talk about a pick and go, eh? But what do you think are the biggest improvements that Ireland have to make over the next sort of, even coming into the Six Nations?
I think we've got to be a little bit careful, because it has been a wonderful 12 months. They've played exceptionally exciting rugby that I've really enjoyed. It'll go close to the best 12 months in Irish rugby, like to beat New Zealand in New Zealand, South Africa. You know, what a 12 months they've had, and it's been entertaining, and it's been a revolution. The way they're playing, the style, the thinking is great. I think the last few weeks, if we consider when the opposition are down a man or two through cards, Ireland have been really poor. And this is, again, in all the positives, there's a couple of negatives. Again, on Saturday, 13 men against the Australians for 2 minutes. Again, there's another one. Very, very tactically naive. They should have called a scrum. You could see the bench calling for a scrum when the Australians had to hook a sin bin, because Parecki was off for the game with a head bin, and then the Vianga was sin bin for a neck roll. If Ireland had called a scrum under the laws,
that was before half time, Matt.
Was, mate, yeah.
And John Fogarty was going crazy on the sideline saying scrum. Kick to the corner.
Exactly. Kick to the corner more than Australia kept them out. If they hadn't have gone for they would have had 13 men for about 8 minutes. I think it was 7.5 to be fair. In the end, they only did it for 2.5 minutes. So that's tactically really poor from Ireland. But even then, at the scrum, they had a 6-on-4. In other words, 6 Irish attackers and only 4 Australian defenders, because they had to put 8 guys in the scrum. And twice they went down the short side. The second time, Mac Hansen went in a touch. Now, against Fiji, the same thing. And they still didn't attack them. They didn't even get an overlap. So Ireland really have a lot of work to do on what happens when opposition get a card, because that's when you put matches away. So if they're playing France or England at home next year and in the Six Nations and France get a card, you have to take advantage of that. So that was a big one. The second one was against Australia. Australia had 3 separate outside centres. Like that back line for the last 20 minutes of that match was decimated. And Ireland didn't take any advantage of that. Now, Sexton was off the field, but Ireland was so lateral, it just allowed the Australian back line to drift, to slide the fence, which is what the Australians use, where the Africans are really up and hard. The Australians say, so we do your best and we're going to push you onto the sideline, because the sideline never misses a tackle. And that's what they did. And for Ireland to only score the tries they did in that game, and I've got to say, to a lesser extent, the Fiji game, should give us some warning. We have to be better than that. Now, there were players out. There's no Henshaw. You know, there were injuries. I get all that, and that's right. But if we're saying let's keep the reality, because what this Irish team has to do is keep evolving and keep growing. If they just stay put, we're going to get done. We'll get done by France in the Six Nations. If we stay still. So it has to grow. It has to move. That's the areas. There's probably one other area, and I agree with Alan. It was the kicking in the first half. Because what did Australia want to do? Give me the ball. I'm not giving it you back. At one stage in the first half, I had it written down here. I just pulled my notes out. It was 139 tackles were made by Ireland compared to 51 by Australia. I think it was about the 55-minute mark in the second half. 139 tackles by Ireland compared to 51. Now, that wasn't what it ended up at full time. But that tells you Australia just kept possession, which is what La Rochelle did against Leinster and what the template is going to be against Ireland. Keep the ball, slow the rucks. Keep the ball, slow the rucks. So the more Ireland kick, and I agree with Alan, you do have to kick. It was a wet night in Dublin. But the more they do that, the more they're going to counter or add to their own demise. So they're at an interesting point. They're at a really, really interesting point. They're number one in the world. They showed incredible determination overcoming adversity against both South Africa, particularly South Africa, and lesser against Australia. They hung in there against Australia. But the French are going to ask a very, very – they got everything. The French have got what South Africa have, but they got much, much better attack and brilliant individuals. So that's the game I'm really looking forward to. And I think after that French game, we'll really, really know a lot more about what 2023 holds.
Yeah, we sure will. Alan, we can't go through the pod without talking about Josh van der Flaar, World Player of the Year. He's won about 4 awards in the last 6 months. Unbelievable stuff from him, and just a credit to him and I suppose his family as well.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. I think just really consistent in what he's doing, and it's very well deserved. I think it's great to see an Irish player get it again, and it's on the back of a lot of I think in rugby, obviously it's a team game and you rely on your teammates, but that bit of zip in his legs, that anticipation, that game management, and the way he's reading the game, a lot of stuff has improved for Josh. He's become more aggressive in his carries, in his defence, and that consistency. He looks after himself well, and you couldn't meet a nicer fella. He's an absolute gentleman. I said this after the first test. I went out for a walk on Sunday morning, and Josh van der Flaar was out for a walk, and he was going to mass on Sunday morning. I couldn't imagine, after a difficult situation like that on Saturday night, he doesn't take a drink. He looks after his body so well, and he's a very humble guy. And I do go to mass, but I couldn't envision myself going to mass on Sunday morning after a big test match in Auckland. And here he was just trying to live life as normal and do the normal stuff. And I just think it's an incredible achievement for him, and it's deserving. He's the kind of guy that if you introduced him to anyone or brought kids around him or anybody, friends to meet, he's just such a mannerly, nice, humble guy. And I think he's at times, I've said this and I've said it to his face, I think he was too nice over the years, too nice on the rugby field. And that's, it's not part of his game as regards being nasty and pushing guys and grabbing their jerseys and being confrontational. But I think he's brought that bit of aggression up in his game, that bit of an edge that he's going to, you know, dominate his opposition and win those collisions and stuff. Incredible athlete and very well deserved. It's wonderful for him, and I think he's a really, really popular choice, and I think everybody thinks he deserves it. He was a clear-cut winner for me.
Yeah, he definitely did deserve it. Matt, I suppose final one there. Just looking, Ireland obviously great rugby, world number one. You mentioned France. Who else we got? The obvious: New Zealand, England, South Africa. Who else have you liked? Are they the teams sort of that, if not, will be beating Ireland, certainly be rivaling them anyway?
Just before that, Stuart, I think Alan and all the back rows go to Mass on Sunday because they need forgiveness for what they did on Saturday. Especially Quinny when he used to play against me. He was always...
That's a confession match, yeah. Confession match.
Well, you needed forgiveness. You can get forgiveness at all spots.
Matt, I tried to let him away with that. Like,
you know, I'm not just saying that, but the beautiful thing about the international game right now, Stewie, Al and I were talking about this 2 weeks ago when we had a lot of fun doing the A game. I can't remember a period where there is so little between the top 8 or 9 teams at the international stage. It's amazing. You know, look at Argentina this year. They've beaten New Zealand, England, and Australia. You know, and pushed France close at one stage last year. You know, like there's not a lot between all these sides. Scotland have really lifted their game. They played exceptionally well against New Zealand. I got to say the Wallabies are ranked. I think they're ranked 9 now. I looked the other day. Now, I'm not into the rankings because not everyone plays each other. There's just indications. They should have beaten France and they should have beaten New Zealand. They've beaten England and they should have beaten Ireland. And they've got a number of players out. Probably most of their three-quarter line and back line is missing. So there's a lot of pluses to that Wallaby side. The other part is the draw of the World Cup means they're in a pretty good place. So I think the international game, as far as competition goes, is very healthy because for a long time, New Zealand was so far out in front of everyone else. It was just not funny. It was New Zealand and everyone else. And quite often the scores would be by 20 and 30 points. The fact that England drew with New Zealand the other day, I think is a really healthy thing. So I think the game, so we go to the Six Nations next year, you know, and everyone's focusing on France. Ireland have got Wales first up. Well, they're up and down. They've got Scotland. These are away. Wales, Scotland, Italy away. Italy beat the Wallabies. Like the Italian sides, all the work that Steve Abboud did in developing their academies over the last 5 years, they're starting to really benefit. Now, I don't think they're going to be there at the top of the races, but if you go to Rome and you're not on your money, they prove they can throw you now. This is a very different Italy than 15 months ago. So again, mate, I just think it's really exciting. For Ireland, being number one, I think we all got to take this. Being number one in the world rankings is meaningless. It's meaningless. All it tells us is Ireland are at the top end with another group. And that's a good thing. But I don't think number 1 or 2, we should worry about that, or 3 or 4 or 5. Don't worry about that. Just know that Ireland's at the top end. But if you turn up on the day and you're not ready, you'll get beaten. That's what the form at the moment is telling us. And that is, one, as viewers, that's what we want to see. It's exciting, it's dramatic. And the other one, for Ireland, it goes the other way. They can beat anyone. On any given day, Ireland are capable of beating any team in the world. And that's really great for Irish rugby.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's been a great year for Ireland. Let's hope the momentum keeps going, lads. Thanks for joining me as always. And we go again for another 10 months of rugby and a Six Nations and World Cup to look forward to. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks a lot.